Here's a list of all the contents that are in the fabric crate. So as you can see, here is everything that I'm going to need at this moment to apply the fabric to the tumbler. They're already painted white. That's just because it's a personal preference. You can apply fabric onto a stainless steel tumbler. I do just recommend that you still sand and prep your tumbler properly and with washing it, just to remove any unwanted oils from the tumbler. As you can see here, I'm using the Mod Podge that was provided in the crate in a little applicator bottle. I apply a generous coat as the first layer to apply the fabric to the tumbler. And I'll go around just making sure that it's smooth and that all the Mod Podge is just even around the tumbler. We don't want big globs of Mod Podge just because it'll take longer for it to dry. The fabric does absorb the Mod Podge pretty quickly, so the drying for this step is going to be pretty quick. What I just did now is I just applied the fabric where I wanted it. You can easily pick it up and reposition it if you'd like to. I like to try to center a main character or something like that on the front. And I'll just go around smoothing it down with my hand just to make sure there's no air bubbles or anything like that. Next, I'll grab my fabric scissors and trim the rims. I try to keep a spare set of scissors just for fabric, just so they're not gummed up with glue or anything else from crafting from different projects. Once I get the rims trimmed, I'll just make sure it's still how I want it to look. And then I'll apply the first coat of Mod Podge to the top of the fabric. As I said before, Mod Podge dries pretty quickly, but in these next few layers that we'll be adding to the top of the fabric, I will set them aside, sometimes put them in front of a fan just to help the drying process. In total, we'll probably have anywhere from 4 to 5 coats of Mod Podge on the fabric just to help protect it later on from the epoxy. We don't want resin seeping into the fabric, because if it does, it'll have like a water spot left and it just really looks ugly. So we try to protect the fabric as much as we can by different coats of Mod Podge. And then later on, I'll show you CC DIY's quick coat that we'll be adding as well. Right here, you'll see me checking the underside of the fabric that's on the tumbler. I just want to make sure that I'm putting Mod Podge over that little bit of a flap that we still have there, because it'll be much easier to cut the seam when you have that dried Mod Podge. It's just more rigid and we'll be able to trim it a lot easier. Once we're done, we'll just set it aside and I'll move that flap just to make sure it's not touching the rest of the tumbler. We don't want that excess fabric to touch and to dry to either side of that. It's really hard to get the fabric off from being glued if that happens. Now here's the 22-ounce slim tumbler that I had showed earlier, and we'll just be applying the Harry Potter fabric to this one. I like to use slim tumblers or even curved tumblers when I do zippers, just because it creates that nice V that I want. I've done it on skinny tumblers too, and that's perfectly fine. I just chose a 22-ounce slim just for this one. Now this is a really busy fabric, so I'm just trying to see what do I want kind of front and center on the front of this tumbler. And just like the other one, we're going to go around, just smooth it down just to make sure there's no bumps or wrinkles anywhere. And then we will apply the first coat of Mod Podge. This is the tumbler that we'll be adding the zipper to, which is totally optional. The rest of this segment for the cup, I'll do the same thing that we just did as far as trimming the rims and adding the Mod Podge, and then we'll set it aside to dry as well. Now once the first coat of Mod Podge is thoroughly dry, we'll be able to cut the seams. You'll feel that the texture is different. The fabric isn't really soft, it has more of a canvas type feel. And this will allow us to cut the seams a lot easier and have a really perfect straight line. Now in everybody's crate, there is washi tape. You can use whatever tape you like. I had electrical there. Some people like painter's tape. Whatever will allow you to easily cut a straight line. Now I'm just grabbing my X-Acto knife. I do like to keep one of these extra also aside for fabric tumblers, just to make sure I have a good, nice blade when I'm cutting fabric. As you could see there, I went down it only once. I went back down a second time just to make sure I didn't have any little snags. It cut the fabric really, really easily. Then you'll see me fold the flap back over, and I'll use that same line for the washi tape and put it right back down. You can feel along with your finger, and just to make sure that the fabric underneath has that same line. And you can use the washi tape, you can run your finger down it, you can use a different piece of tape, whatever you want to do, and we'll just do another cut and we'll have that same line and we'll be able to cut that excessive piece off. Now with that extra piece, just put it aside and you can use it for another project, a smaller tumbler, a half wrap, or you can even use it for pin wraps. That's what I actually like to do. Now for the remaining flap that's still up, we just apply the Mod Podge and push it back down to the tumbler, so now we can create a full wrap. You'll see me pushing my finger along the seam of the side of the fabric that still was currently up, since it's not stuck down to the tumbler totally yet. Because this is cotton lycra, it'll have a four-way stretch to it. So I didn't use very much pressure when I was using my thumb, just to push the fabric and align it with the other side just really gently. So if you have a little bit of a gap, you're going to be perfectly fine. You're not going to have any missing area between your two pieces of fabric. Now with the fabric completely wrapped around the tumbler, we'll be going around one more time, doing a second coat of Mod Podge to the tumbler. As I said before, we'll have about 4 or 5 coats of Mod Podge to help protect the fabric from resin. But before you do another coat, you just need to make sure that each coat of Mod Podge is fully dry. Now on the second tumbler, we'll be doing the same thing. We'll be cutting the seam with our washi tape as a guide, with our X-Acto knife, and then we'll apply the second coat of Mod Podge as well. After that second coat of Mod Podge is dry, we'll be able to cut the rims of both of the tumblers. This is the cup edging tool from Wicked Shimmer that was in all of the crates. Use the spacers provided and you can move the blade height higher and lower depending on how much glitter or rim that you want to show on your fabric tumblers. Once you have the blade height set, you'll be able to use your tumbler and firmly push it against that razor blade. I recommend going around at least twice just to make sure that you have a good clean cut all the way around. So once you do it for one side, then you'll do it for the next, and that piece of cut fabric should be removed very easily. Now that the rims are trimmed, we'll go around the rims with a little bit more Mod Podge just to protect that seam that was cut. This is where the epoxy can seep in later on, and so we'll just be careful just to make sure that that has a good clean seal as well. Once these rims are sealed and dry, then I'll go back and do a third coat of Mod Podge. Once the tumblers are dry again from that last coat of Mod Podge, we'll tape off the rims and we'll be able to glitter or paint the rims. As you can see here, I already taped off the rims for the zipper tumbler, and I also cut some tape just to put down where I was going to want that V for that zipper. So I'm just showing you that here. Those tape lines I'll use to cut off that V part. So I'll grab my X-Acto knife and I'll just trace along where I had put those pieces of tape down. Now, once we have that part trimmed, I'll go ahead and just pull it off. And I'll look at it again just to see how that V is going to look with that zipper on. Now later on, we'll be painting and glittering the rims of the exposed parts of the tumbler. Now here I'll be showing you how to tape off the rims. I'm using electrical tape just because I have a lot of it, but you can still use the washi tape that was provided in the crates. I'll tape off the top and I'll take off the bottom, and once I get to where I'll have a little bit overlapping, I'll cut it and fold it over just so when we remove the tape later on, we'll have a little flap that we can grab pretty easily. Now here's my favorite part, glittering the rims. Here is the really pretty color from Glitter Done that we'll be using trolley treats for these tumblers, and the pop of color Boudreaux that was in all of the crates. You can paint with anything that you'd like, the sponge brushes that I provided, or you can just use a regular paintbrush. I really like these pop of color paints. All you need is one coat to apply the glitter. Sometimes, depending if it's a darker color, I will just paint them, allow them to dry just for a minute or two, and go back with a second coat before I put the glitter on. Now here I'm going back with just a second thin coat of the pop of color before I put the glitter on. I want to make sure that the base of the tumbler is evenly coated with the glitter, so I'll just tap it down with the remaining glitter that's on that parchment paper right there. You can see how really pretty this glitter is, and it's going to reflect once it's under epoxy. Now I'm just giving that top section a second coat of paint as well, and then I'll be glittering it. Now at the end of glittering, I'll just knock the cup just to shake off any excess glitter. And what I forgot to grab here was a little chip brush that I like to use to help me remove any stray pieces of glitter. But I'm just using my finger right now just to clear up anything that I can see really easily. Here I'm just inspecting it one more time just to make sure I like the glitter coverage and make sure I don't miss anything on the rim. Next, we'll grab our second tumbler and we'll do the same thing. We'll paint it with a pop of color and we'll glitter the rims. Now once the glitter is set and dry, I like to go back with my Mod Podge adhesive spray. You can use any spray that you'd like. Hairspray, some people use Loctite or clear Krylon spray. I like to just use Mod Podge matte spray. It's what I've always used. That just helps us make sure that the glitter is not going to move. You can brush it off with a chip brush. After this, there's going to be very little that comes off, but I'm also going to use this chip brush right here just to move it around the fabric, just to see if there's any rogue pieces that I don't want on there. So yeah, just go ahead and remove the tape that you've used, and we'll do the same thing on both tumblers as far as just wiping off any excess stray glitter that we'll see. If there's any parts that have stuck underneath that Mod Podge, it's fine. I mean, you can pop them off with your X-Acto knife if you need to. So what I didn't show here is that I do go back around the fabric one more time and do a third coat of Mod Podge. And after that's dry, I like to apply the CC DIY Quick Coat as a final layer to the fabric. You can apply the Quick Coat with anything that you'd like. I like to use the sponge brushes, especially since they're not expensive, and I'll just throw them away if I get them too messed up. Or you can use a paintbrush. But I'll just be going around all of the fabric first, and then you can actually use this on top of the glitter. I started using this when they came out with it because I would always put a coat of Mod Podge on top of the glitter layer, and sometimes I would put a little bit too much and the shininess of the glitter wouldn't come through. But that's not the case with this clear coat from CC DIY using the Quick Coat. The glitter still sparkles really amazingly, and then once we do the epoxy layer later on, I definitely don't have to worry about any glitter moving around this tumbler. Now while the Quick Coat's drying, I'm going to go ahead and just trim the zipper. So here is the E6000 that we'll be using later on to apply it to the tumbler. And we'll add the zipper pull to the zipper tape before we trim. Once we have the zipper on, we'll be able to cut those black pieces of the fabric material away from the zipper. I'll have a little lighter there. You can use a torch if you'd like to, but just be really careful because we don't want to melt any parts of the zipper. So I prefer just to get a regular handheld lighter to get those little stray pieces later on. But just go with your scissors and go right along the edge of the zipper and that black fabric part. You'll move the zipper up and down just to get it out the way. But once all that black part's off, you can go back with the lighter just to singe any little pieces that you couldn't get with your scissors. Once you're done with the zipper, we'll just set it aside and let the Quick Coat finish drying. So here we'll be adding the zipper. For the skinny tumbler, we don't have to do anything. As you can see here, that Quick Coat is making sure that that glitter is not moving. So here we'll be adding the zipper. Before I add it, I want to remove the zipper pull. You can, if you want to, tape off the zipper pull and leave it on there, but as it's spinning, I found out later on it just makes getting the epoxy resin off of it a little bit more tough. And what I just used was some needle nose pliers. I'm really careful when I'm removing the zipper part. I'm using the smallest part of those needle nose pliers and going up little by little until I have enough room created that that pull will slide off. Now before we glue the zipper to the tumbler, I just want to put it down and line out where I'm going to have it. I need to trim off some of the parts of the top and trim off the bottom, but I'll just outline it where I want that zipper to be. Now once the zipper is ready to go, we'll open up our E6000, and what I'll do is I'll add just a little bit along that Y part where we're going to put down the zipper. A little bit goes a long way with this E6000, but if you put a little bit too much, you can always wipe it off with your finger or even a Q-tip. Now that the E6000's on, we'll be able to grab our zipper and just put it down. Just take your time aligning it where you want it to be. It'll easily pop up and be really movable for a while. It takes a good amount of time to dry, so we have plenty of time to move it and see exactly where we want. Be really careful around the zipper pull area where it's a little bit thicker, and you'll see me keep moving my fingers up and down, and at the end we'll push it down right there around that zipper pull area to make sure that there's no air or space between the tumbler itself and that zipper pull. As I said earlier, if you have a little bit of excess that you can see, you can simply just wipe it off. Once you push it down, there's going to be a little bit of glue that comes out here and there, but just make sure to push it down pretty firmly to the tumbler, and we want to make sure that it's not lifting before we set it aside to dry. The E6000 will say to let it dry for 24 hours, so I do like to let the zipper part dry overnight before I epoxy the tumblers. And here I'm just mixing up my resin. I have part A and part B already together. I'm mixing it up, making sure it's blended really well. I probably have close to 30 milliliters for each of these, and I'll probably have a little bit left over. And just apply your resin however you like. Some people are slatherers. I like to just use one finger. But just go around the tumbler like you normally would, and just make sure you got the tops and the bottoms completely covered. And I'll just make sure it's smooth. Again, because of that CC DIY quick coat, I don't have to worry about glitter moving anywhere. It's one of my favorite things to use for fabric cups now. Once we get to the zipper tumbler, just make sure when you're going around the zipper area just to be careful to not let that epoxy pool in one area that's around the zipper. If it does, it might just have a little bit of air bubbles that you'll be able to see when it dries later. So as it's spinning, you'll see me constantly going around and moving my finger around the zipper pull area. If any epoxy gets underneath that middle zipper area, I'll show you in a final step how to easily clean it off. So don't worry about resin getting on top of that area that we'll put the zipper pull back onto. And now I'm just going around with my heat gun, or you can use a torch just to pop any bubbles. I like to go around each tumbler twice. Now here's my little secret from removing any unwanted resin from around that zipper pull area. I use my torch. You can use a lighter, or you can actually heat up the end of an X-Acto knife. But I just quickly torch that middle area, and then I'll use my X-Acto knife, and the resin just pops off really easily. Now this tumbler only has one coat of resin, so I will put a second coat on, but I just wanted to show you how I put the zipper pull back on. Simply slide the zipper pull back up and press down firmly on that metal piece. I like to use something that has a little bit of softness, like the end of my needle nose pliers, and push it down firm.